What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 50 running back rankings for 2024 fantasy football. So these rankings can help you in your draft if you already have drafted. Maybe these videos can help you, put together some trades if you want to make some moves before the season. If you want to see my full set of rankings, they're free to you guys in the description. I believe it's my top 200. You can download the Google Sheet, so check that out. If you enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now let's dive right into tier one. And I will say just right off the top, this video isn't going to be as in-depth player versus player as some of my previous rankings videos. If you really want super in-depth, you can look at my last two running back rankings videos. I just think at this point, people probably want a quicker hitter, just showing you guys how I'm grouping these running backs together into different tiers. So starting off here in tier one, I have my clear top three. It's Christian McCaffrey, it's Breece Hall, it's Bijan Robinson. In my overall rankings, I have CMC as my number one. I have Breece Hall as my 104, and then Bijan Robinson as my 105. But I do think if you're playing in leagues or platforms that you know are going to be super running back heavy, I could definitely see an argument for Breece or Bijan to get picked, higher up, not as like my fourth or fifth. So I think you could move those guys up. But in terms of the running back position, these guys are my top three. And I think all three of these dudes have the upside to be the running back one overall. Now, shifting into a much larger tier two, these are all players that I would be fine taking in the second round. Go Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Jonathan Taylor, Kyren Williams, Saquon Barkley, Isaiah Pacheco, and Travis Etienne. Jahmyr Gibbs I have as my 12th overall player, but I'd obviously prefer if I could get him in like the early second. Devon Achane is probably the guy that stands out as someone I'm really high on. I know some people don't like him. They're scared off by Mostert. They're scared off by his size. I talked pretty in depth about him as a potential league-winning running back. I'm just shooting for upside here. I think some guys, JT, Saquon, they have concerns with their receiving role. They have touchdown concerns. Devon Achane, maybe he's not that prototypical workhorse, but the touchdowns are going to be there. The efficiency is going to be there. I want to bet on a young, extremely talented running back, so that's why I have him ranked pretty highly within this tier. Kyren Williams, I think, is a nice early to mid round two pick. Maybe his workload's a little bit less than last year with Blake Corum coming in, but he is coming off a 20-plus point per game season, so tough to have him ranked any lower. And then Isaiah Pacheco and Travis Etienne are just two guys that I continue to become more and more interested in. For Pacheco, it seems like he does have like three-down workhorse upside, and having that type of usage on the Chiefs offense, I think definitely warrants him being in tier two. And honestly, if you wanted to draft him higher than this, I really wouldn't push back a ton. And then for Travis Etienne, he's coming off a season where his usage was pretty solid. He just lacked the efficiency. But when we look at his first full season, that's really where he thrived. He was a super efficient option, a great runner. So if he can bring back the efficiency we saw in 2022 and pair it with something close to his 2023 workload, I think he could definitely be in store for a big season, especially if this Jaguars offense takes a step forward, like I think they probably will. Now, shifting into tier three running backs here. It's going to be Derrick Henry, James Cook, and Josh Jacobs. I know a lot of people are not going to like this Derrick Henry ranking. Just hear me out. I know most people would put him somewhere here in tier two. For me, I just don't think he has enough upside to outweigh the risk that comes with him, right? He is in his 30s at the running back position, and not just a 30-year-old running back, but a 30-year-old running back with a lot of tread on the tires. And then when you look at his ultimate ceiling, he is not someone who catches passes, and I don't think the Ravens are going to want to run him into the ground, especially in the regular season. Like, I don't think they're going to want to give him 21, 22 plus carries a game, and then they get to the playoffs and he's completely cooked or injured. This is a team that, should be rolling into the playoffs pretty easily. I think Derrick Henry's going to be fine. Like, I think he's going to be super efficient. I think he's going to score touchdowns, but I think he lacks that ultimate upside, which is a player that I'm fine avoiding given the fact that I do think he's a fairly risky bet. Then for James Cook, good runner, good pass catcher. I think the only thing holding him back is just that the Bills don't like to use him near the goal line, but I still think he can hit in the touchdown department just being a part of this Bills offense. He's going to be involved as a very impressive pass catcher. They're losing Stephon Diggs. They're losing Gabe Davis. So I'm coming around on James Cook as like an early to mid fourth rounder. And then Josh Jacobs, he's someone I've been lower on throughout this offseason, but I am starting to come around. The injuries to Marshawn Lloyd and A.J. Dillon are definitely helping. I was kind of thinking he was going to be a part of a committee. We know LaFleur loves to use a committee. We saw him do it even with Derrick Henry when he was in Tennessee. We know we saw it with Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. But at this point, like if there are no other competent running backs, Josh Jacobs is probably going to have a strong workload, at least to start off the season, and then maybe he can lock off that role. I still think, a committee is in play, but I think Jacobs has a little bit more workhorse upside than maybe he did just a few weeks ago. Now, shifting into tier 4, we have Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, Rashad White, and Alvin Kamara. If I'm being honest, this tier is a little bit gross, at least like 3 of the 4. For Mixon, White, Kamara, it kind of seems like you're making bets on inefficient options being workhorses in their offense. For Joe Mixon, obviously a nice fit here with the Texans. Seems like the RB2 Dameon Pierce has kind of struggled. Cam Akers, I believe coming off another Achilles tear, has actually looked pretty decent, so he might end up being the running back too. But Mixon, you're probably expecting a pretty strong workload on a good offense, so a fine pick here in tier 4. Kenneth Walker, I think, is the one dude that like stands out as being like a pretty good running back. I just don't know if he has that workhorse upside. You do have Charbonnet kind of getting involved there. And then also you have receiving question marks, but reports out of training camp have actually been that Kenneth Walker has been involved as a pass catcher. So maybe, he breaks out in that area this season. But in terms of talent, I would say at this point in their careers, Kenneth Walker is the best guy in this tier. For Rashad White, I do have some concerns. Efficiency has been an issue, but kind of similar to him and Alvin Kamara, I'm kind of just accepting that I think they're going to be used like workhorses. So if you want to push these guys up, draft them earlier than this, I get it. The upside is there if they just retain their usage from last year. Like I said, same thing with Kamara. He struggled efficiency-wise. You would think that a guy like Kendre Miller would get a bigger role. Maybe Jamal Williams works his way in, but Jamal Williams hasn't made a ton of noise. I don't know what Kendre Miller did to Dennis Allen, but it's like every time Dennis Allen gets the opportunity to talk about Kendre Miller, he just absolutely dumps on him. And it's not like he's even done anything. Like the dude just can't stay healthy. And every press conference, he's just getting ripped by Dennis Allen. So I feel like Kamara is going to walk into another strong usage year. Still not a player I'm overly interested in targeting just because that archetype feels kind of gross. But if you do like him, not going to push back too hard. Now shifting into tier 5, 4 players in this tier. We have James Conner, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, Ramondre Stevenson. And within this tier, I definitely say that James Conner is like by far my favorite pick here. Coming into the offseason, after the draft, there was definitely some concern that Trey Benson could kind of force a committee. They spent a day 2 pick on him. Looking at Conner last year of his deal, Benson's probably the running back of the future. But with what we've seen, the reports we've heard, the preseason usage we've seen, I feel like James Conner has a pretty strong hold of this RB1 spot. Now, that's not to say Trey Benson couldn't impress and kind of work his way in throughout the season, but I think like this turning into a committee doesn't seem as likely as it did, maybe a few weeks ago, a few months ago. So I like James Conner here. Could just end up being the lead back on a pretty good offense. He was someone I was high on heading into last year, but it was more of like a gross volume bet, almost like a discount like Alvin Kamara from this season. But he was actually just like had a nice bounce back in efficiency, was a straight up really good running back last year. So if he has that same ability here in 2024, I think he's a pretty interesting pick. Aaron Jones is also interesting here, switching from the Packers to the Vikings. Vikings offense probably isn't going to be great, but I do have a lot of confidence in Kevin O'Connell. I think he's going to get something out of this unit. Aaron Jones should be their running back 1, so I think he's a fine like mid to back end RB2 play. David Montgomery, not going to be the highest ceiling guy, kind of playing behind Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of like fantasy relevance, but I think he's a fine like fringe RB2 weekly, back end RB2. But then he also just has nuclear upside if Jahmyr Gibbs were to go down. Like if Gibbs gets injured, misses any time, Montgomery is like a locked in top 10 running back, maybe even top 5 in that situation. And then Ramondre Stevenson wrapping up this tier should be the running back 1 for the Patriots. There are just a lot of question marks with this Patriots offense as a whole. The quarterback position, offensive line has not looked great throughout the preseason. So Ramondre, I'm going to wrap up this tier. Now looking at tier 6, we're getting into guys that are kind of in splits, ambiguous backfields, or just like leaders of gross backfields. So starting off with Jonathan Brooks, I talked about him in my league-winning running back video. I'm very high on Jonathan Brooks. He's probably not going to be great in the first quarter, maybe half of the season, but I think he has a lot of upside towards the end to be a league winner coming off a torn ACL last year. Then we have Raheem Mostert, and if you want to draft Mostert higher than this, it's tough for me to push back too hard considering the fact that he was the running back 4 in points per game last year. But in terms of being someone that's going to scare me off of Devon Achane, he's just not. He's 32 years old. People love to talk about Achane being injury prone. Raheem Mostert's the guy who actually has a very extensive injury history. So Mostert, I'm fine drafting him in this area. If he retains the same role from last year and doesn't completely fall off a cliff, he is going to pay off. But he's also a fairly risky pick because, like I said, 32 years old, he could turn to dust at literally any moment and just be not relevant at all, especially when you have Jalen Wright who could step up. So I guess there's some upside, but there's also a decent amount of risk if you are drafting Raheem Mostert. Also in this tier, we have the Steelers running backs, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. Before the Jalen Warren injury, I had them back to back, and I believe I had Warren one spot ahead of Najee. I moved Warren towards the back of this tier after that injury, though. Just add some uncertainty, potential risk of re-aggravating it. And then also the fact that this is a new offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. Najee Harris is going to get that first crack to potentially control this backfield. We have DeAndre Swift, who, as a Bears fan, I just really don't know what to make of that signing because it's a fairly congested running back room. You have Khalil Herbert, you have Roschon Johnson. I don't know how effectively they're going to get, DeAndre Swift going as a pass catcher. That's obviously, his best skill, but you have so many weapons here. You have, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet. So how much volume is Swift actually going to be able to command as a pass catcher? And then you also throw in the fact that he's probably not the best goal line back. That's probably Khalil Herbert. You even have Roschon Johnson, who can work in on third downs because he's a good pass protector and can catch passes. So I think he's fine in this tier 6 area. Could definitely end up being a solid pick, but I feel like his potential role is somewhat up in the air at this point. Then we have Zamir White and Brian Robinson, guys who should be favorites to lead kind of grosser backfields. For Zamir White, I was a little bit more optimistic about his usage earlier on in the offseason. I think at this point, you're going to have Madison kind of working in on receiving downs. I think Dylan Laube also has upside to work in there. And then Brian Robinson, I do think he's going to be the clear-cut RB1 for the Commanders. Also just a solid running back. I think he was a back-end RB2 last year. I think he could definitely be a fringe RB2 option in the 2024 season. Now pivoting into tier 7, we have, I guess, more locked-in committee backfields here. Starting off with some of the, just straight-up committee backs, Zach Moss, Chase Brown. Who knows which guy's going to lead this backfield? Right now, I'd say it's pretty close to 50-50, but on a very good offense. And then kind of same thing with Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard, just on a lesser offense. I think that backfield's looking like it's going to be 50-50. Each guy took a drive in their final preseason game. All the reports we've heard, out of their training camp, from the coaches' press conferences, it's just pointed to this, being a 1A, 1B. We'll see which guy takes it. I slightly prefer Tajay Spears just based on his age. I think Pollard has the downside of just kind of being washed at this point, coming off a rough season, but maybe he bounces back and this is a solid 1-2 punch. And then between those two duos, Javonte Williams, Devin Singletary, I just think if Javonte can bounce back year 2 after the torn ACL, he should be the Broncos' clear top running back. Don't think he's going to be the workhorse, but should be fine in this tier 7 area. And then Devin Singletary, not a pretty offense, not a great situation, but he should be lined up to be the lead back here. Now getting into tier 8, we are kind of getting into elite handcuff territory or kind of grosser running back splits. I start off this tier with Rico Dowdle, Cowboys backfield. I think Rico Dowdle should be the favorite to lead this backfield. Obviously not a guarantee. They can make a trade. They can make a move. He's not a super established player, but there is a lot of upside in that Cowboys backfield. So I'm fine taking a flyer on Rico Dowdle. Also have Zeke later on in this tier. It could be Zeke leading this backfield. I just prefer to bet on the younger guy compared to the dude who's already proven that he's washed. I guess some elite handcuffs here with Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet. We have Gus Edwards, who should be the favorite to lead this Chargers backfield. Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford. Their usage is kind of up in the air. It looks like Nick Chubb is going to start the season on PUP, so he'll miss the first 4 games. Jerome Ford should be the starter for those, but when Chubb gets back, are they just going to hand him over that role? There's no guarantee he's even close to the same dude we've seen in previous seasons, so I think their usage kind of up in the air. And then wrapping up with Trey Benson, like I was talking about him with James Conner, a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, I thought he had more upside to force a committee. Right now, he's looking like more of a handcuff, but he probably does have a little bit more juice to actually work his way into an offense than some of these other handcuffs. And then the final tier here, tier 9, kind of just a solid mix of guys. Starting off with J.K. Dobbins here, I really like J.K. Dobbins. I was high on him heading into last year. If he didn't get hurt, I think he would have been an absolute smash pick. But it's tough to be super confident in a running back coming off a torn Achilles that has been a death sentence for a lot of guys out there. But this is also a pretty wide open Chargers running back room. Like I said, in tier 8, Gus Edwards is the current favorite to lead it. He's nothing insane. So I feel like Dobbins is a fine pick. If he looks completely washed early on in the season, you can always just cut him and then get another option. We have Austin Eckler, who I think is like a fine pick here in tier 9. Like, he should be the Commanders' pass catching back. My concern is just that even if he has that pass catching role, is that ever going to be playable on this Commanders offense with Jaden Daniels? So if you like are doing a 0 RB build and you just want someone you can throw in there, I think Eckler's a fine pick. But if you have like 2 or 3 stud running backs already locked in, I might prefer to draft one of these handcuff options that could come with more upside. One of those dudes could be Jalen Wright, who I feel like is a double-headed handcuff. Achane goes down, Mostert goes down. Jalen Wright could step up and be fantasy relevant right away. Chuba Hubbard, kind of similar to Jerome Ford in the sense that he should be the starter their first couple weeks of the season until Jonathan Brooks comes back. And then maybe they have a solid split through like midseason, but I think eventually he's just going to turn into your standard handcuff. Then we have like legit handcuffs, Ray Davis, Bucky Irving, Tyler Algier, Ty Chandler, guys who probably aren't going to be super relevant week to week, but do look like the clear running back twos in their backfield. So that is going to wrap it up for my top 50 running back rankings. Let me know your thoughts down below. Who are you higher on? Who are you lower on? Any fantasy questions? Would love to hear them. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.